YouTube, what's good? Send you back at it again with another video. So, for a lot of you, I'm just gonna get this out the way. For a lot of you that have been following my channel, you guys have stayed, and that's crazy, that's fantastic. I'm actually pretty happy about that. And it's mainly because you guys originally subscribed for Warzone content, and I haven't uploaded Warzone content in a while simply because I just haven't been having fun with the game. For a lot of you, you probably have never heard of this game, and if you have, you probably played it, and you probably played it a lot. This is the Elder Scrolls Online, and I've been playing this for about a year after it came out, and I've been playing it ever since, just been happy. You know, there's always content and something to do in this game, and I don't have to worry about getting aimbotted from across the map. Now, for those of you who subscribe for Warzone content, don't worry, I'm not completely done with that. When Vanguard comes out, I'll be right back. I'll be right back on it, most likely, because Vanguard looks really good, and with the added anti-cheat coming in, it's definitely going to reduce the amount of cheaters that we run into, so maybe we'll actually have fun playing Warzone. So, like I said, when Vanguard comes back in, I'll definitely be covering Warzone content again. As for the Elder Scrolls Online, I'm actually going to start adding this into my rotation, mainly because there's not a lot of content creators that actually make content for this game, and I think that if there was, it would be able to get out, and we'd probably be able to grow the community a little bit. However, today we're going to be talking about my Necromancer tank build. I'm not going to give it some cheesy name. You'll probably see a cheesy name in the title or the thumbnail, but I'm not going to give it some cheesy name here. We're just going to go over everything. Now, what I do notice is that there are a decent amount of necro tanks. The problem is they all do the same thing. They stack a whole bunch of stats into health, and then they try to go do end game content. They don't have any kind of sets to really offer any kind of group utility. They don't run stuff like Yonakrin. They don't run stuff like Saxleo. There's a very small majority of necro tanks out there that actually prepare for end game stuff, but there's a lot of them that just stack a bunch of health so that they can stand in front of the boss, and they rely on everybody else to do the group buffs. This build right here is pretty much going to correct all of that. No longer, hopefully, will you see a whole bunch of necro tanks running around stacking 55k health, 45k health, and not offering any kind of group utility. So, getting into the build here. Obviously, these are the unbuffed stats. They're going to look a little funky, I'm not going to lie. Even sometimes when I open up my stat sheet, I look at my mag recovery and go, wow, what in the world am I doing? But don't worry. I'll pretty much get to why we don't really need to worry about the recovery later on. Now, as you can see, we're rocking 39k health, not too high, not too low, pretty much the sweet spot. As long as you're around 40k with or without the warden buff, you're straight. That's all you really need for pretty much everything in the game. Resistance, 21k, don't worry. I can almost guarantee you that 90% of the time with this build, you're going to be either at or above the hard cap on the physical and spell resistance, and I'll get to why in a little bit. As you can see, we are stacking the resource pool, and the main reason why is because since the majority of the abilities that you use on a necro are actually free or require you to use a corpse, like I said, this build is a micromanagement build. This really requires you to kind of pay attention to what you're doing. You don't want to overcast stuff because you're going to ruin the already established effect. Now, we got 23k mag, we got 39k health and 24k stam. Huge resource pools, so you're hardly ever really going to run out of anything except stam, and the only reason why you might run out of stam if you're overcasting or if you're doing too much is because our block cost is high. I would opt for reduced block cost enchantments, but I don't really need it, seeing as I hardly ever run out of stam because I actually know what I'm doing. So we are running the ritual. Yeah, I know, it's a little odd. I actually wasn't running a mundus stone until about 10 minutes ago. I didn't even realize it. I don't know when it happened. My mundus stone got completely removed, but I ended up running the ritual, tested it out for a little bit, and realized that I don't have any issues anywhere else. I don't have any issues with recovery. I don't have any issues with my resource pool. I don't have any issues with movement speed due to the CP changes and the gear that I'm running. So I went with the ritual. I don't need extra health because I have so much mitigation that I don't take enough damage for me to have a high health pool. And with the ritual, I'm basically not only able to have incredible self heals, but when it comes to healing the group for a small portion, I can actually do that, and I'll show you how in a little bit. We're running sugar skulls, obviously. I mean, that's just a tank bread and butter food. If you're not running this, I don't know what you're doing. Minor Aegis, obviously, from the 5-piece of whatever set you're running that actually has that ability, and then the ESO plus stuff. Now, for the gear, Saxleo Champion. Now, I actually have 2 sets that I run. Obviously, as a tank, you need to have multiple different sets to run. For the jewelry and the ice staff, I run Saxleo Champion because this set doesn't need to be double barred at all. It does not need to be double barred. You should only be casting your ulties on the bar that you have Saxleo Champion on, seeing that you want to basically have this while your Necro ulti is going off, and I mean your Colossus. Because every single time you cast a Colossus with this up, you're going to have Major Force as well as the Major Vulnerability, which is most likely going to go for about 25 to 35 seconds depending on how much ulti you have saved up before or during the fight. So this right here doesn't need to be double barred. I know a couple of people that double barred. I find it useless, especially when there's a better 2-piece out there. If you already don't know what I'm talking about, you'll see in a little bit. But this right here is pretty much the set that I go with for everything, and obviously I'll change up depending on what content I'm doing. If it's dungeon content, I might actually take this off and put on PA, because I can just put on Warhorn since the fights aren't gonna last as long. But for trials, where obviously the fight is gonna last for 5, 10, 15 minutes, this is gonna be a lot more beneficial, seeing as obviously the damage is gonna last longer, meaning that you're probably gonna end up shortening the time of the fight. For short fights, doesn't really matter. If you're doing a 2-minute fight in a dungeon, I'd rather do PA. They'd get a bigger benefit out of PA than they would this, especially since I could pop a Warhorn, and they're obviously going to have minor force up already. So, depending on the content, you can change this out for PA. I have PA right here, obviously, robust. I don't really need to change the jewelry because I hardly ever use it, seeing as I main tank a lot of the content. But should I need to off tank it, I'll slap on PA real quick, slap on the jewelry, slap on my ice staff, and go ahead and pop PA. I don't mind. Now, for the body, I'm actually running Yonakrin. Now, I know a lot of people that also run Yonakrin, sword and board, and jewelry. You can do that. I mean, as a matter of fact, you can run Saxleo on the body if you want to. I also have Saxleo in case I ever need to really off tank. I have Saxleo for the body. So, it's pretty much a personal choice depending on if you're going to off tank or main tank. You can run either in whichever way you want to. However, if you're going to run Saxleo and you're going to run PA, then I do PA on the jewelry and the ice staff, as well as Saxleo on the body. That's the way that I run it, simply because you don't need a double bar vigor to keep up PA, and PA is technically a buff. So if you treat it as if you were in PvP, you're going to keep all your buff sets on your back bar because they carry over to your main bar. So I put PA on the back bar, pop vigor twice, flip over to my main bar, come back 10 seconds later, do it again. This way I'm able to pretty much always have Saxleo on both bars when I'm off tanking, in case I have to have Warhorn on the front bar for certain fights where a Colossus just really isn't going to make sense to use, depending on, if we're in trash or not. So that's basically how I kind of set up my character for that. Monster set, we're running Encratis Behemoth. This is pretty much a mainstay. This is mandatory for main or off tanking. Now, depending on the content that you're doing, you can remove this, seeing as you only really need one in the group. But in case you have to run it, always have it. Now, typically you want the off tank to run it, and a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about how Encratis work. This actually requires the enemies to be in the AoE, not the allies. If the allies are in the AoE, they get the flame damage reduction, so they don't take as much damage from flame damage. But if there's really no flame damage in whatever fight you're doing, there's no point in actually having them in the AoE. So you can leave it on the main tank. But for stuff like Crowd Rest, Asylum Sanctorium, trials where the off tank is most likely going to be in the group, I'd rather have it on the off tank, allowing the main tank to kind of run whatever they feel like they need to run to make themselves comfortable. because you only need one in the group. And if there's a lot of flame damage, like obviously Sunspire, when the dragon decides he wants to sweep his head across and flame the entire group, you'll Nocturne's fight, then yeah, you want the off tank to run this in the group. Now, if you're on the main tank and you do not need to run Encratis because obviously your off tank has it, there's a couple of different variations you can run for this. I tend to run Earth Gore. Depending on the content, I run it in Cloud Rest. Obviously, you already know, if you're in Cloud Rest, you're gonna run Earth Gore, mainly because of Baneful. Now, I tend to dodge Baneful a lot, so I hardly ever have this go off unless I'm in portals. This is the main reason why I run it, for portals. If I'm in portals and I'm low health, Earth Gore is basically going to give me the burst heal that I need to be able to finish putting Ellie's susceptibility, yes, I said susceptibility, I'll get to that later, on the crystals, so that the DPS can actually burn through the crystals a lot faster, allowing us to come from the portals. Now, say you're not in Cloud Rest, but you're in a trial where you don't need to have Encratis, Sunspire, Asylum Sanctorium, something else, right? For Asylum Sanctorium, I'd actually run Ladythorn, simply because you'll be able to have Ladythorn go off and reduce the amount of damage that the group takes from the kite phase, from gust of wind, from the breath, if they happen to get hit by the breath. The spit also hits 10% hard less, and especially for execute when the flames come up, this is huge. If the off tank has Encratis and you are running Ladythorn, overall the group is taking 15% less damage from the flame, so they're pretty much going to live through that regardless if they're not getting healed or not. So for Asylum Sanctorium specifically, I'd run Ladythorn, and over time you'll learn how to proc your health so that you'll be able to pop this whenever you need to. Now for other fights, if I don't need Encratis, I don't need Ladythorn, I run Engine Guardian. I mean, hey, you can never go wrong with overdoing it with your resources. I know a couple of people would have liked to do Stonekeeper, but it's just not worth it. I've tried Magma Incarnate. I like it, but that's really only for 4-man content, and since we're talking about trials, this just isn't going to work for trials. However, in 4-man content, you can go with this as much as you want to. I really like this for 4-man content. Now, for the weapons, obviously you're going to do the Ice Staff. You're going to have both Ice Staffs, both charged, and both frost damage enchants. I realize a couple of people are probably going to look at this and go, this guy's insane. Where's this Crusher enchantment? Why is it not infused? The main reason why I'm not doing Crusher is because there's just no need for it anymore. We have plenty of sets in the game that give you a huge AoE debuff for trash fights, and with the way mag is right now and the availability of penetration through CP, there is absolutely no need for Crusher enchantment. There just isn't. However, this right here, paired with something that I'm going to show you later, is massive to increase the group's DPS in terms of trash fights and even boss fights. Now, for the main weapon, I'm actually running the Master's Perfected Sword and Board. I feel like people underrate this set so much, and the main reason why I run this is because this gives me just a free heal. It's a free heal and it's a free resistance buff, so I'm pretty much at cap on spell and physical resistance. And let's say I take a giant attack like Zamaja's Mind Blast before I actually reapply my taunt, I'm gonna get healed for it, and any of the overhealing counts as free mitigation through my spell and physical resistance. Not to mention that I also get the 3% healing taken, which makes it a lot easier for me to get healed out of Baneful. Now, I also run the damage magical poison. There's a different variation of this that I believe applies minor breach to the target, but this right here is minor cowardice. This equates to about 5%, which is the exact same as minor maim. This allows me to not have to run heroic slash. Now you can run it if you want to. I choose not to. It eats away at stam, and I don't need the maim considering how much damage mitigation I have, and I don't need the ulti regen considering that I actually have availability to necrotic potency as well as the Nord's tanking passive. So if we go into our skills here and we scroll, we have, obviously we're a Nord. You get the max health, the frost resistance, you get the max stam, but you also get 5 ulti whenever you take damage every 10 seconds, which is massive. That is huge ulti regen, especially when you're running necrotic potency, and you can run heroism potions if you want to too. If you really want to stack heroic slash, maybe you just love that ability, you can do that. It's not bad. I've used it before. It's just that with the amount of ulti regen that I get now, especially in trash fights, I don't need heroic slash, and having the heroic slash every single ad in the fight, I'm good. So now we have rugged, obviously more physical and spell resistance. Can't pass it up. Free mitigation. Now we're also running Warhorn, obviously bread and butter. You already know this is pretty much standard for all boss fights. If you're not on a Necro, this is pretty much your Colossus. If you're on a Necro, you can run Colossus, or you could run this. If you're running Saxhleel, this basically guarantees a 35-second major force uptime. It stacks. So if you cast your Warhorn, right when you get it, you're going to get 25 seconds from Saxhleel, and it's going to stack with the 10 seconds from this, which gives you guaranteed 35 seconds every single time. You just don't get the major vulnerability. However, if you want to do that, you can just as easily sit there and have somebody else pop a Colossus right when you drop a Warhorn, and now you're going to get 15 seconds of major vulnerability, 35 seconds of major force. Somebody else could drop another Colossus, and now you have 30 seconds of major vulnerability, and you only needed one Warhorn for that entire rotation. It's huge. But if you want to stack both, you can do what I do, and you'll have 25 seconds of major force and 15 seconds of major vulnerability if you cast the Colossus with Saxhleel. Now we have Caldrops. You can use this in certain fights where you really need a snare to kind of slow down ads, but there aren't really too many fights outside of the portals and Cloud Risk where you really need this, so I have it just in case I need it, but you don't really need it. Now for the Undaunted, obviously you want to get your Undaunted passives, you want to get Inner Rage. This is going to be your ranged taunt, and it also guarantees the Radiate synergy. Bone Shield, I don't have it morphed. I have it morphed on a different character, but you definitely want to get this on your tank in case your group needs it, because the morph of this actually gives them major vitality, which increases their health, their healing received by 16%. So that's huge. Whenever they hit a synergy, that's 6 people just getting free 16% extra healing. Massive. Obviously, you also have the Overflowing Altar, just in case they need the the Blood Feast synergy. That's pretty good too. I don't really use it because typically you only need 2 in a group, and most likely your healers are going to be running it or your off tank. So depending on which one of them is running it, you will almost never need to run this if you're main tanking it. And then obviously if you're off tanking, you can run this too. Now, Fighters Guild, we have Silver Leash. This is pretty much our chain. Obviously on DKs you have chains, on Wardens you have Frozen Gate. On Necros, you're running Silver Leash, and I actually kind of like this a lot better than chains, because even though the range isn't as much as chains, I still get that free snare, which stacks with whatever other snare is going on, up to the snare cap, which I think is 100%. And then you have Ring of Preservation, which you can use in certain fights where they just need to have increased snare recovery for dodge rolls out of certain mechanics. I recently used this in VHOF hard mode, placed it down, and people were obviously benefiting from the reducing of the 5% damage, and that small little heal, that 498 heal, it actually equates out to a decent amount of healing when you're pretty much just stationary, just taking considerable amount of damage. It's pretty nice, surprisingly. Obviously heavy armor, all your passives, you want to get every single one of them. Nothing in medium armor, nothing here. And then this is where it gets pretty good and kind of funky for a lot of people that don't really read patch notes. So we have Crushing Shock. This is going to be your ranged interrupt in case you really need it. We have Elemental Blockade. This is one way to proc Brittle, and it's also a pretty decent snare. It does slow enemies, and it does pretty much immobilize them randomly, but there's other abilities that you can use that are way more consistent with this, so I don't even use this. However, this right here is something that people are sleeping on, and this is Elemental Susceptibility. So recently, in a recent change, Elemental Susceptibility was changed. A couple of patches ago, I don't know if a lot of you paid attention, but they've been changing this over and over, and you kind of glance over it because Elemental Drain has been the go-to, right? Well, not anymore. If you look, it says every 6 seconds while this ability persists, the enemy is afflicted with the burning, chilled, or concussion status effect. Now, to put this into perspective, burning can still proc in Kratos. So now, the main tank or the off tank has a free ability to proc Kratos every single time burning goes off. Now, it's not going to be, glorified 100% uptime as if you were to run it on a DK tank or a DK DPS or even a DK off tank. But if you just had to have to run it on a Necro, you don't want to sit here and get an Inferno staff, and you don't want to have to spam crushing every single time you need to keep Kratos up, right? You don't want to have to flame skull. This right here, even though it may not be 100% uptime, will proc Kratos for free passively, and I'll show you in a second when we go over what our fully buffed stats look like. Not to mention that the major breach actually lasts for an entire minute, and the reason why this is important is because when you can't puncture the boss, or maybe an ad from a mile away, they're always going to have this on them for an entire minute. That's more than enough time for you to get back to them. But also at that same time, if you hit the boss with this, you're not only getting brittle, you're not only getting minor vulnerability through concussion, but you're also getting Kratos as well as minor breach every single time you poke the boss, and major breach still lasts for that 1 minute. It overrides the major breach on puncture or pierce armor, so it doesn't reduce it down to 14 seconds. It still keeps it at that 1 minute timer. So I'll show you when we get to the fully buff stats. Then this is basically my new favorite skill, Pulsar. So what this does is you release a surge of elemental energy, dealing X amount of magic damage to nearby enemies and afflicting them with minor mangle. I don't think people really understand how strong mangle is when you're going through trash fights. This right here, just that alone, is absolutely it's ridiculous. You're just automatically removing 10% of a target's max health. Now, there is a catch to this. It does not work on boss-like enemies. So for a majority of the enemies in the game that have those little 1 gold bars next to them, if you're in a Tyrant archive and you see the 1 gold bar before you get to the 2 gold bars, and then obviously bosses have the 3 gold bars. For a majority of those 1 bar enemies, they're considered boss-like enemies, so this does not work. However, for I believe a select few in the game, this does work for, because I have gotten it to proc on those before. But for trash fights, if you're in a dungeon, every single one of those ads is just going to have their health automatically reduced by 10%. That's 10% damage that your DPS doesn't have to do. It's just free damage. But here's the kicker. As you can see, Frost Pulsar also provides minor protection, but this thing also triples the innate chance to proc brittle. It's an AoE brittle. So, it stacks with elemental force, it stacks with charged, and remember, charged is getting a buff next patch, so it's going to be 480% increasing on brittle proc. You're also getting minor protection, you're reducing their health by 10%, so every single time I hit Pulsar, I'm basically proccing brittle right on every single ad around me, reducing their health by 10%, causing them to take 10% free damage. Not to mention, when brittle procs, they're taking 10% more critical damage, and I'm giving every single person that's an ally around me minor protection, so they're taking 5% less damage just for me doing this while I'm standing in the middle of everything. Now, what we are also using is pierce armor, obviously, because come on now, it's a stacked ability. You get minor breach and you get major breach. That's huge. What you can do is you can use heroic slash. I choose not to, but you can. You can use defensive stance. I use it in Lokesti's hard mode, but that's about it. I've tested it in Cloud Rest. It's cool, but after I redid my CP, wait till we get to the CP. You don't even need this. Shield charge is really good for fights where you have to hurry up and close the gap to get to a target to maybe interrupt, but there's not too many fights like that. And with the way that this build is, you don't need it. Now, here's where it gets fun. We have Living Death, renewing animation. I pretty much always have this on because you just never know when someone's going to get hit with a one shot. And since you can't heal through one shots and you don't want to waste time having to get that res, if it's an important res, a support, I'm getting them up automatically. I don't care. Because I'd rather have that support up, saving everybody else, rather than everybody, huddling, making a fort around that one person's body, losing drastic amounts of DPS on the boss, and not being able to hurry up and get back into the fight. Yeah, it's going to cost me 335 ulti. Yeah, I could have casted a Colossus and probably increased the DPS, but if I had and everybody was DPSing while that healer went down or the off tank went down, we would have died. So sometimes you just got to make that judgment call and go, you know what, hey, yeah, I'm going to sacrifice everybody getting a DPS boost now, but we're actually going to clear the content. And that's what I focus on. So in addition to renewing animation, we have blood sacrifice. Now, I actually run this because of the health recovery negate, and I'll get to that when we get to the passives. However, this is a massive, and I mean massive, self-heal for free. Basically, it's free, man. Now, we have expunge and modify. You can run hexproof, but I actually like this because you get a ton of resources back when you have a ton of status effects on you, because it only removes 2 at a time. And if you happen to get hit by bleeds that happen to stack on the same instance, so if you get one of those bleeding effects that stack with the more times that you've been hit, you get a ton of resources back from just trying to clear every single one of those stats. And for those of you who like to tank VHOF, when you start tanking the melee adds as a necro, the bleeds from, I believe it's the capacitors, stack. Once they get past 20, you just have infinite resources. And if you have a healer, you can hold them for as long as you want to and just spam expunge and modify and get a whole bunch of resources. And I'll put a clip of that at the end of the video so you can see. Spirit Guardian, free heal, free damage mitigation. It's a unique damage mitigation buff, so it stacks with everything. Major protection, minor Aegis, major Aegis. It stacks with everything, so it's just free. Not to mention that while you have this active, you also get a mag and stam recovery boost of 200 for 16 seconds. So free. It's just free. Now, here's our passives. This is the main reason why we are actually running the blood sacrifice, because it applies the health. It applies minor defile, which actually negates. It gets negated by curative curse, so you don't even get affected by minor defile. This right here just completely negates that, so you just get a free 10k heal. Not to mention that, I'll show you right here. Let's say there's a corpse on the floor, right? If there's a corpse on the floor and I hit this blood sacrifice, I don't even have to be looking at it. It'll consume the corpse, heal me for 10k, and then heal somebody else in front of me. So we're just going to stand in front of it, act like I'm tanking. Ooh, I got to heal. It just consumed the corpse, healed me, and healed whoever else would have been in front of me for that 10k, which I actually use a lot in Cloud Rest in case the off tank comes up and they happen to get hit by Baneful. I'm gonna obviously be resetting my armor, so every single time I do, if they happen to be right there, I'll just look at them, pop my heal myself, and heal them. Free. Absolutely free. Now, obviously the other passives, you have near-death experience. This is the main reason why I actually run the healing ulti, well, the reviving ultimate on my main bar, because if I ever get to the point where I just really need to be healed, this right here is gonna boost my chance to get critical heals with my Master Sword and Board, my Hungry Scythe, and pretty much anything else that I use to heal myself on this bar. But since I only have 2 heals on this bar, it's those main 2 heals. Now we have corpse consumption. This is why I don't actually run Heroic Slash. I have so much ulti regen between necrotic potency, if I decide to run that, taking damage, and I mean basically dealing damage, that I don't really ever need to sit here and run Heroic Slash to get the extra ulti regen. However, if you feel like you really want it, you can run it. And then, like I said, whenever the Spirit Mender is active, you get the increased, oh, I didn't even realize it was health. I learned something new. Health, mag, and stam recovery. I just overlooked that by 200. Huge, massive. Now, Bone Tyrant. This is basically our tanking skill line. I have Goliath for certain fights where you just need this thing, quote unquote VRG hard mode, but outside of that I never use it. It's cool, but you'll see, like I said, when we get to the CP, there's so much mitigation on this build that you never really need it. Now Hungry Scythe, this is basically our main heal. This heals us automatically for 5k, 5.8k obviously, with an additional 1960 for every single enemy hit, up to a cap of 5. So if you hit the first enemy, it's going to hit him for 5k, give you the 1960, and then for 5 extra enemies, it'll count another 1960 per enemy. And then after that, you get a little bit of healing over time, which when we fully buff up with the test dummy behind us, you'll see how strong this can really get. We got Beckoning Armor. This is basically our second chain in case we ever really need a second chain. This allows you to basically get free pulls, and the way that I like to do this is enter fire targets behind me that I know need to get pulled in, and every 4 seconds they'll get pulled in. It says 3, but it's actually 4. So every 4 seconds, once they hit you with an arrow, flame attack, it doesn't matter, they'll get chained in, and it's a free pull. And since we have silver leash on the back bar, I'll pop bones, sit over here and enter fire, let the armor pull the crap behind me in, I'll pull the crap from in front of me in, and then I'll sit over here and pulsar, reduce all of the health by 10%, and let them get absolutely ran over. Now for the rest of it, you got necrotic potency, obviously, like I said. For trash fights, what I'll do is I'll rotate this out with blood sacrifice, since I don't need that, and since we're trying to get through the trash as fast as possible, or if I know it's going to be a fight where there's going to be a lot of trash adds in certain trash phases, like obviously first boss from off Loricage, surprisingly Lokesti's hard mode. If there's a lot of trash, I'll just pop necrotic potency, get all that ultimate back, and then I can, drop a Colossus whenever the group needs it. Now, for the rest of the abilities, Agony Totem, I use this specifically for Yonakran hard mode in Sunspire, because you can pull the pixies under, drop the totem, and the second you leave from under the boss, it'll actually fear them, so they never get out. They never actually get out from under the boss, so they're just free wall spam, and since they're feared, they're not attacking anybody, it's free damage, it's just free. Now for Gravelord, I literally only have 2 abilities in here. The Colossus, obviously, for the major vulnerability, but the reason why I run Frost over the Pestilent Colossus is because I have an Ice Staff on my back bar, and since I do, and this deals frost damage, this can actually proc Chilled and Brittle. So you gotta think outside the box. This thing can proc Brittle while I have Elemental Susceptibility up, which can proc Encratis and Brittle and Minor Vulnerability. Then we have Boneyard, and this is mainly for fights where I can't get to a target. I can't Susceptibility, I have to have something else there, and I just really need to have a way to debuff something. I'll have Boneyard just ready. Now, what we're going to do here is basically show you what our fully buffed stats are, and then we'll go over the CP. So fully buffed, if I pop Bone Armor, I sit over here and I hit the Mender, and then we go and poke this dummy. What this dummy is going to do is give us Major Courage, Minor Courage, Minor Toughness, which will give us the Warden buff, so you'll see what we actually have when we're under the effects of a Warden healer, as well as the Warhorn buff, which will give you the amount of resources that we'll have when we're under the effects of Warhorn. So we'll pop this real quick, go ahead and hit that, hit this, and as you can see, we are just, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And this is without a potion. So we'll go and look at the stats real quick after we poke this guy again. Go ahead, poke this guy. Looking at it, pretty nice. But with the CP, I also have a CP that gives me a butt ton of health recovery whenever I get an ulti. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and hit this well real quick. Pop an ulti. And now I want you to look at the health recovery that I have once I actually get fully buffed here. So we're gonna hit this real quick, hit the armor. See how ridiculous this is? I almost have 4,000 health recovery, almost 2,000 stamina recovery, and since I'm not using mag a lot, I don't need that much mag recovery. It's good. It's absolutely fantastic. And remember, I'm running the Master Sorting board, so whenever I poke this guy, I get healed. Not to mention that obviously I'm under the effects of Minor and Major Courage, so if we look at our heals while we're under the effects of that, and then I'll pop Blood Sacrifice to actually get the 8% extra healing from Curative Curse, you'll see that the Blood Sacrifice heals for a butt ton. So we'll go ahead and hit this, pop a potion, pop Bone Armor, hit this, pop this, and then we'll look at this. 10.9k for free. Just for free. It's absolutely free. Go ahead and hit him again. Look at the Spirit Mender, 4k every 2 seconds, and you gotta remember that the Spirit Mender heals the lowest member of the group. So if that guy is low health and you hit him for 4k and this happens to crit, you gotta remember that crits are basically 50% off of the base game. So no matter what you do, if you have no kind of crit modifier, you're always going to heal for 50% harder than what the normal heal is. So this is automatically going to hit him for about 65, maybe 55, 65, somewhere around there. So the stats are insane. Absolutely insane. Just so you can get another look at that, go ahead and hit this, pop a potion. Character stats, like I said, 35k on physical and spell resistance. You're way over cap. The hard cap is 33, so you don't need any more mitigation. You have almost 4,000 health recovery when you're at a full ultimate. Almost 3,500 weapon and spell damage. You're good. You are absolutely fine. Now, let's go ahead and look at the CP real quick. So for the CP, there is one important CP that you need in the green tree, and that is right here, Breakfall. Because there's a lot of fights where you actually take a decent bit of fall damage. Not in dungeons, but in trials. And I'm mainly looking at you, Cloudrest. And since there is pretty much nothing else that I need except for a steadfast enchantment, and this right here, I decided to go with Breakfall because whenever you get tossed by Zamaja, if you like to do the extra damage burn at the beginning of the fight, you basically take no damage at all. I would implore all the DPS to run this because they don't need anything in the green tree anyway. So if they run this, they're basically not taking any fall damage, not to mention that if they go into the portal, this reduces the amount of fall damage that you take falling off of the wall when you have to go up the elevator. So this is massive for Cloudrest. Now, this is where you're going to get all your mitigation at. So what I do here is I run pretty much a couple of the gold stars. You have Precision, you have the Eldritch Insight, you have the Tireless Discipline, and then we come in here, you have the Offensive Pen, just to have it basically, and then I have a couple of points into Flawless Ritual to basically increase the chance that I can actually proc Brittle. Now, we have Staving Death. This is pretty much one of the biggest changes. We now have Ironclad, and I love it. It is huge mitigation. You're pretty much at the mitigation cap with this build, which is 90%. So we have Quick Recovery, we have Elemental Aegis, we have Hardy, Preparation, and then Ironclad. Now we also have Enduring Resolve, we have Duelist Rebuff, and then we come into Mastered Curation, and you have Blessed, and that's just about it for this tree. Now to finish off, you get Last Stand. And this right here is actually underrated as hell, especially if you're tanking Cloudrest, because think about it, whenever you get hit by Baneful, you're right there at 20%, and Baneful actually is a dot, so it counts as a negative effect. So if you felt like running Sustained by Suffering, you can, but obviously when you get healed out of Baneful, that effect goes right away. However, this right here procs the second you get hit by Baneful, so sometimes I'll purposefully get hit by Baneful just so I can get the Major Heroism, because I'll get hit by Baneful, and for 9 seconds, I'm just gaining free ultimate. This is, again, why I don't run Heroic Slash. I have so much ultimate generation that I just don't need to run it. Now, for the red tree, we're rocking Hero's Vigor, a little bit of extra health. We have Balanced Vitality, again, a little bit of extra health. You do not need the armor passive because, yet again, with the Master's Perfected Sword board, you are way over cap. You're about 2k over cap. In fact, it goes so high that it just caps out both sides. We have Defiance. This is just obviously the gold stars that you need to get to actually get to the CP that you want to have. Now, for the Survivor Spite tree, we're actually going with Sustained by Suffering. Nah, I'm kidding. You can do this if you want to, but it's not really necessary. I just really do Mystic Tenacity so I can get the reduced duration on status effects, because, don't get me wrong, status effects are cool to get hit by on a Necro because it increases your healing by 8%, but that's what we run Blood Sacrifice for. So if you really want to run Sustained by Suffering, you can, but it's not necessary. You have more than enough recovery, especially since the majority of your abilities cost virtually nothing. Now, here is pretty much what's giving you all of your health recovery. I feel like every single tank in the game should have this, because as much as you like to pop Warhorns, there are going to be fights where you just don't pop a Warhorn because you simply need to hold on to it to wait for burst damage. So, Strategic Reserve gives you a ton more health recovery while you're holding onto that ultimate, which could be for a long time. Especially if you're in Lucestis and you're off tanking, you put this on, you got a whole bunch of health recovery while you're out there waiting for the DPS to basically push his jump. And then once you pop it, obviously you're going to get the ultimate back, and until you pop it again, you have all that health recovery. Now, this is where it actually gets kind of important. These are pretty much mandatory for you to have. I run Hasty for the 4% movement speed and outside of combat, and I run Celerity for the 10% movement speed inside and out of combat, because we are running Bracing Anchor, which pushes us to the mitigation cap of 90%, which basically reduces all damage taken while blocking by 90% unless it's Oblivion damage. So, Bracing Anchor reduces your movement speed by 16% in combat, which is why I run Celerity and Hasty, and I stack it with Swift Jewelry, so that if I'm in Cloud Rest or any kind of fight where I need to run, I'll be able to get there first, because obviously as the tank you want to be able to get there and pull before the dummy DPS do, and then start complaining about not having a tank there that wasn't blocking all the damage. So there you have it. That's basically your bread and butter build. This is pretty much going to get you through everything. There's a ton of variations that you can make in terms of the gear setups. I gave you a majority of them, but if you feel like you're comfortable enough to sit there and make some different kind of changes, you can. Yet again, so you can see the fully buff stats. We're going to pop Mender, Potion, Bone Armor, hit this, bam. Almost 4k health recovery. You're capped out on resistances for a small period of time. I mean, you got 42k health, 26k, 25k. You go ahead, look at your heals real quick. I mean, 4k on the Spirit Mender. You got 10.1. It can be 10.9 if you were able to activate it and actually get that Curative Curse passive. So yeah, the stats on this are absolutely insane. The mitigation's capped out both on your spell and physical resistance and your actual block mitigation. As a matter of fact, I'll show you my advanced stats so you can see that too. That's actually pretty important. So for the advanced stats, it's gonna say 79%, and then it'll be capped out at actual 90%. For some odd reason, the Bracing Anchor passive does not actually show up, but 90% is the cap for block mitigation. So while you're blocking, you're basically at cap for block mitigation. Like I said, I'll actually post a clip of the V-Haul friend that I did recently, where you can get infinite resources with Expunge and Modify, depending on how many bleeds you actually take inside of that trail due to the melee ads. And hopefully you guys try the build and enjoy it. Make sure you guys leave a like. It was a long one. This is definitely a long video, but it was necessary. I felt like this needed to get out there because a lot of people, like I said, are stacking 50, 60k health, and they're not really tanking, they're just absorbing a bunch of damage. They're just sponges, and I don't like to see that. So hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Make sure you guys leave a like. Make sure you guys subscribe if you're not part of the community already, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.
Can't stay the same for some of us. just stay the same when some